Today on Hearts of Heroes, a massive tornado hits eastern Georgia and obliterates everything in its path.
We heard a noise and he opened the door, and that's when the tornado was in my neighbor's yard ripping it to shreds.
We just heard this terrifying rumble, sounding like a roar.
They were so scared.
This is a story of two families, one tornado, and countless heroes.
It almost seemed like it was coming directly at me.
I just did what I thought I needed to do.
Picking up the pieces after a storm of this magnitude is a story of perseverance, dedication, and goodwill.
This storm proves that everyday people can be the bravest of heroes.
An EF4 is the second strongest tornado on the enhanced Fujita scale. That's the system that rates the intensity of tornado damage. And while they're relatively rare, an EF4 can demolish almost anything it comes in contact with.
But when one of these deadly twisters ripped through eastern Georgia, one community proved they were stronger than anything Mother Nature could dish out.
Heard the call go out about a possible tornado on the west end of the county.
I could actually physically see it start tearing buildings up through the center of town.
We felt the house fall off the foundation. Then it picked up in the air and started flipping.
Just shut the door, and the door flew away from me. It's like, I'm gonna die.
Just outside of historic Savannah, Georgia, is Bryan County, home to about 40,000 people. Terry and Nolan Driggers live in North Bryan County with their daughters, Zoe and Kenzie. Nolan works for our sponsor, Belfour Property Restoration, a company that cleans up after natural and man-made disasters.
When someone needs help, me or someone else, the first person they see, first person that shows up to help. When it comes to disasters, I've always been the type of person to think, you know, this won't happen to us or it'll happen somewhere else.
But on April 5th, 2022, a disaster would happen here in the Driggers' hometown in the form of an EF4 twister. Battalion Chief Matt Fleming was on duty.
I was doing my daily rounds. When I came to the city of Pembroke is when I saw the sky rotate.
I was listening to the radio, and Chief Fleming says, I see the tornado. We have a tornado passing through Pembroke.
I started easing into the city because I could actually physically see it start tearing buildings up through the center of town.
And the first structure was Pembroke's historic courthouse.
Well, it's made out of brick. The brick walls collapsed in. And we had people inside there, air just blowing everywhere. It was scary, very scary.
The tornado crossed town and headed straight into a neighborhood where it smashed into the Hendricks Park Community Center.
That was a big structure, and it was just completely destroyed.
Chief Fleming began chasing the tornado.
My concern was the way it was going along the roadway. If it didn't shift directions, there was going to be damage and there was going to be possible loss of life.
Jason and Jenny Freeman were at home with their daughter Sylvie and son Silas, unaware that they were in the direct path of the tornado until the warning started blaring.
It just said, tornado has been seen in your area, take immediate shelter. And we're like, oh my goodness, what is going on? I looked out the window at that point, and the trees were really waving.
It was a pretty big tornado coming towards us.
Ran into the bathroom, all four of us. It could not have been more than 30 seconds, and we just heard this terrifying rumble, sounding like a roar.
And then we hear the siding being lapped up. We hear all the glass break in our house. All of our windows just shatter. At that moment, I'm shutting the door, and I take my hand off the doorknob, and it just flies away from me. The next thing I see is the walls just come up over our head.
Everything just lifted up. It was like the house was just made of the thinnest paper, and it was immediately gone.
The next thing I remember is I wake up and I start to feel myself being pulled back into the storm. And I was paddling, just trying to grab whatever I could.
Coming up, the storm's wrath is far from over.
I could tell it was huge, just terrifying.
But first, this safety tip.
Did you know the pressure created by tornadoes can be strong enough to cause your window glass to shatter?
Broken glass can be extremely dangerous. That's why, if a tornado is approaching, it's important to seek shelter in a low-level room with minimal windows like a basement, closet, or a bathroom.
If you live in an area prone to tornadoes, identifying the safe spaces in your home beforehand might just save your life.
In April of 2022, an EF4 tornado was tearing through Bryan County, Georgia. The twister hammered the courthouse downtown, the rec center, and now was steamrolling toward Jason and Jenny Freeman's house. They took shelter in their bathroom as the tornado shredded their home.
Started to feel myself being pulled back into the storm. And that's when I just started trying to grab as much as I can on the ground. It's like, I'm gonna die. You know, I'm just gonna die. And then moments, literally seconds happened and the storm dissipated and just went away from us.
Away from them, but straight toward the home of Nolan and Terry Driggers.
I was on the phone talking to a friend of mine. We were actually trying to make fishing plans for the weekend.
We was just talking about that following weekend, getting ready to go do something. It was just short and brief, and his phone went dead.
We're sorry. Your call cannot be completed as dialed.
And I opened the door, and that's when I seen the tornado. I started yelling to the wife and kids there was a tornado.
We heard a noise, and he opened the door, and that's when the tornado was in my neighbor's yard, and it was headed straight for us. It sounded just like a freight train.
I was trying to hold on to the kids the best I could and was praying that we would be okay and make it through all this. We felt the house fall off the foundation.
And I started praying, please help us make it through.
Then it picked up in the air and started flipping.
Tornadoes of this magnitude can lift structures off their foundation. The Driggers' home was literally picked up and thrown into a tree.
I tried several times to try to get hold of him and couldn't. All I knew then was get in the truck and try to get over here as quickly as possible.
4 miles away, the Freeman family began to wake up in what was once their house.
Silas was actually only a couple feet from me. And then I immediately heard Sylvie crying and Jason. And I think we were all definitely in shock.
A few houses down, Megan Bennett and her husband had just survived the tornado.
When I walked up to the scene of the Freemans, all four of them were covered in debris. You couldn't even see their eyeballs. I got baby wipes and I cleaned all of their faces off so that they could see.
Sylvie had some scrapes and bruises, but the rest of the family's injuries were much more severe.
I couldn't move either of my feet. I was in a lot of pain, and my hand was completely sliced open.
I had this wound in my leg. It was showing muscle and bone.
Their son, Silas, was much worse off.
I found my son and he was foaming at the mouth, and I knew he couldn't move. He was shaking because I think he was in shock.
He kept saying over and over again, my back is broken. I think my back is broken.
I was so scared. And Sylvie did not want her brother to die. And I told her that he wouldn't. I was singing a song to him that I sing, my son. And so I held his hand. And I told him that he was brave and that he could do it. And he needed to just hold on. You just rise up, baby boy.
Battalion Chief Matt Fleming had been following the tornado and witnessed the direct hit. He knew that he needed to help, but couldn't get there. The roads were blocked by downed trees and power lines.
I put my truck in four-wheel drive and literally drove through a golf cart path to be able to get into the neighborhood. I got out of the truck, and the first thing they said to me were, we were in our bathtub and then we were in our yard.
Chief Fleming immediately assessed the most critical victim, Silas.
He had what looked like a puncture wound in the lower left side of his back.
That's when I started to get really worried. They said the puncture wound was right around his kidney, and he said, Mom, I can survive with one kidney.
As Chief Fleming tended to their wounds, he also tried to ease their minds.
I just remember this person being right there, looking me in the eye, telling me it was gonna be okay. And he prayed with me. He took my hand and he prayed with me. And I calmed down.
The Freemans needed desperate medical attention. But with the roads blocked, emergency vehicles had no way to get in.
People that lived in the neighborhood started bringing their trucks over, and we started putting people in the back of the trucks to get them through the same golf cart path that I made entrance to.
I feel my body being picked up in a sheet and put in the back of a pickup truck. They had a flat board for my son and put him next to me in the back of the truck.
They took me separately, and so that was hard. I was terrified because I didn't know what was going on with Silas and Jason.
Coming up, just across town, the Drigger family was facing their own nightmare.
She wasn't moving or saying a word. We were terrified.
By the time an EF4 ripped through Bryan County, the tornado had shredded 13 miles in just 15 minutes. It destroyed homes, historic buildings, and upended so many people's lives.
Despite the devastation, friends, first responders, and even complete strangers stepped up to help their neighbors in need.
The Drigger family was in their mobile home when the tornado struck, sending it careening end over end into a tree.
We barely made it into my daughter's room when we felt the trailer pick us up and start flipping.
A 3-year-old somehow slipped out of my arms. When everything stopped, I was screaming at the top of my lungs, Kenzie, Kenzie, where are you?
We finally found my 3-year-old's feet sticking up in the air, and she wasn't moving or saying a word. We were terrified.
And then she looked at me, she said, Daddy, I'm fine. That was her exact words, Daddy, I'm fine.
Unable to reach Nolan, his friend William Taylor immediately jumped in his truck and rushed to the scene.
We got probably been about a half a mile of the house and the road was impassable. I just got out of the truck and started running down the road.
William knew he had to help Nolan and his family. This is why having a close emergency contact is so important.
We came over and had to knock the window on out so they could actually do that without having to climb on top of the glass.
Me and my 9-year-old Zoe were trying to move some things out the way so that I could get my husband out because he was pretty banged up and had dislocated his shoulder.
Everything was broken. The trees were broken over. Everything, trash was everywhere. Everything was blown. It was crazy.
I burst into tears because our whole life and everything in it was upside down and broke and ripped to pieces.
William got the Driggers into his truck and took them to the hospital.
I had glass in my right hip and in my right foot. Zoe had glass in her right knee and her right leg.
I'm just thankful we made it through it.
Meanwhile, the Freeman family was awaiting word from doctors about their son Silas's injuries.
One of the first things we heard was that that wound did not touch any major organs. So that was a huge relief.
Fortunately, his injury was not life-threatening.
When we finally came back together, I think we're all just overwhelmed and overjoyed to see one another. Coming back together just felt closer, like we were a closer family.
As for the Driggers, the magnitude of the physical, emotional, and financial devastation was beginning to sink in. While thankful to be alive, they were left with virtually nothing.
Heartbreaking, knowing that you lost everything. My whole life, everything in it, pictures. Just knowing that my kids wasn't gonna have a place to lay their head. I'm sorry.
It was a little heartbroken to see them in that condition, knowing that they had just lost everything.
Nolan's friends and family and our sponsor, Belfour Property Restoration, decided that they needed to help. So they raised and contributed funds to help get the family back on their feet.
Nolan is like a brother. It's like family, all of us at the office. We're always there for each other. I just felt helpless and I had to do something.
I didn't expect to have all of this help, but I couldn't be more thankful to Liz, the Savannah Belfour team for doing that for me.
The Driggers, however, still had one seemingly insurmountable hurdle. Their home was in shambles, so how would they rebuild? Coming up, the Freemans meet their hero for the first time since he helped save their lives.
You helped me so much.
But first, another safety tip.
Tornadoes and hurricanes can disrupt phone service for days on end. It can even be challenging to make one successful phone call.
As a precaution, make sure a close friend in another area has an updated list of your emergency contacts. That way, in case of disaster, you can let them know you're safe and your friend can spread the word to those on your list.
Remember, think ahead, trust a friend, and stay safe.
The Bryan County tornado caused tens of millions of dollars in damage, destroying 18 homes and businesses. But no tornado was going to destroy the spirit of this community.
Bryan County is resilient and it will recover quickly. People here help one another and they will continue to help one another.
Now it was time to heal and rebuild. First up, the historic county courthouse. Our sponsor, Belfour Property Restoration, led the charge.
You see a lot of damage within the building. Water damage, fallen ceiling tiles, wet drywall, flooring that's been wet. You've got a lot of important documents, priceless documents that are in this building that you don't want to have wet for an extended period of time. Marriage certificates, a lot of those things are in this building that we need to get out of here as quickly as possible.
Once the documents were removed and preserved, repairs began, and a new roof was installed.
It is very important to get this building back up and running as quickly as possible.
Unfortunately, the damage to the rec center was too severe, and it couldn't be salvaged.
The structure of the building was seriously compromised. The community center is a huge piece of this community. That building will get torn down. We'll rebuild it.
As for the Freemans, they're not sure yet whether they'll rebuild.
Pretty wild. There was a whole house here. It's crazy.
But despite the trauma, they've managed to find some light in an otherwise dark storm.
I've never felt more part of a community and just receiving love from people we don't even know.
That's especially true when it comes to one brave firefighter who drove into the storm to come to the rescue.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. How are you? How you doing?
You look very familiar.
How you doing, buddy?
Thank you for helping me when I was on the ground and being really kind to me and being a blessing while I was hurting.
Like the Freemans, the Driggers lost everything that fateful day in April, including their home. But they did find guardian angels in God's Pit Crew. It's a faith-based crisis response team who donated a new house to the family. Just 2 months after the tornado, friends and family gathered as they unveiled the Driggers' new home.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's absolutely beautiful on the inside and out, and I couldn't be more thankful.
I'm still trying to piece everything together because everything happened so fast. Are you the one that prayed with me?
Yes.
You helped me so much.
This is what I do. They want to call me and my crew and everybody that responded a hero, and we're not. We do this job because we love it, and we do it to help people like y'all and other people that are in their worst times.
To everyone who helped us that day, the first responders, you are amazing. You are rare, and you are special, and you are needed, and we love you and appreciate you.
Now, if there's one thing we can learn from the people of Bryan County, even in the most trying times, we can all take comfort from the love and support of the community around us.
And that's what makes each and every one of these people true heroes. We'll see you next time on Hearts of Heroes.